Hello everyone, my name is Tommy and I'm with Boys and Girls Clubs of St. Lucie County. Welcome to our virtual club. Today, we're going to be doing an experiment. Before we start the experiment, we want to make sure that everyone understands when doing the experiments, please make sure you get permission of the adult at the home before starting the experiment. Today, we're going to learn how to become scientists. And a good scientist does specific things. So they like to, before they test something, they make a guess. And making a guess at what's going to happen during the experiment is called a hypothesis. And so today, we're going to test which things sink and which things float. So make sure before you just start dropping things in the water that you test, or you have a guess and a hypothesis as to which things are going to sink and which things are going to float. The next thing a scientist does is they record what they find. So as we do this, I have this right here, and you can make it at home. It just says sink or float. And I'm going to keep track of which things sink and which things float, because I'm going to look for something a trend or something that makes sense with all the things that we find and try to come up with a conclusion. That's the next thing a scientist does. They make a guess, they test their hypothesis, and then they come to a conclusion based on the data that they found. So I have a number of different things on the table today, and we're going to test those things. So let's get into it. Let's make our first thing. So we usually think heavy things are going to sink, right? But we're going to talk more about that later, why that's not always the case. And density. So density, all things around us are made out of molecules. And the closer that the molecules are together, the more compacted they are. That determines how dense they are. So things like a balloon that you blow up with air. That's not very dense at all because the molecules are all spread out inside. Things like this penny is very dense. I can't bend it. It's hard. Okay? So the molecules are all very close together. Let's make a guess at whether we think the penny is going to sink or float. I'll let you make the guess at home, and we'll record the results. The penny sank right to the bottom. What did you guess when you were at home? Were you right or wrong? Make sure you record your results. I'm going to write that down here on my list. Penny, it sank. Okay, let's test something else. So we said that less dense things usually float, and things that are more dense usually sink, not all the time, and we're going to talk more about that later. Let's try a ping pong ball. Make your guess. It floats. A ping pong ball floats, so the molecules must be farther apart inside, and that's why it's not sinking. We're going to talk about another word called buoyancy. Buoyancy is the ability of something to float. So if something is less buoyant, it will float. Or if it's equal to the buoyancy, or if it's equal to the force in the water, it will float. Buoyancy is the ability of things to float. So things that have buoyancy, like the ping pong ball, can float. It's buoyant. The penny that went to the bottom is not very buoyant. I want to make sure that I record the ping pong ball as floating. What should I try next? I'm going to try a wooden spoon. It seems pretty heavy. It seems pretty hard. Maybe it will sink. Let's test it. The wooden spoon floats. I'm going to record that. I wonder why. How about a shell? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think that the shell is going to sink, or do you think that the shell is going to float? Sink right to the bottom. Must not be buoyant. I'm going to write that down. And I have some different things with me today that I'm testing, but with the permission of an adult, you can test different things around your home as well. How about this? It's like a rubber ball. It's kind of squishy. What do you think? Is it going to sink or is it going to float? And now it's lit up too. Floats. Well, I was going to eat this lollipop, but for science, I'm going to put it in here. And after I put it in there, anything that's in here, I'm going to make sure I'm not putting it in my mouth, and I'm going to make sure that everything is cleaned and everything before it's put back as well. But I want to see if this floats or sinks. What do you think? A lollipop, do you think it's going to sink or float? It floats. So I have to have the ball, it floated, and the lollipop, it floated too. Now we're going to test something, and we're going to learn a little bit more about buoyancy and density. Okay? So I have 2 cans of soda. One is just a regular old Fanta. The other one is a Diet Coke. And I want to see if one sinks and one's full, because they weigh the exact same. It says on the can they're both 12 ounces, so they weigh the same, and they both should do the same thing. Let's see. Here's the first one. It sank. So the first one, so the regular sink, regular soda. So then this should sink, right? Let's see. Why, if they weigh the same and have the same amount and they're both same weight and I hold them in my hands, why does one float and one sink? Maybe it has an air pocket in here? Let me push it down. Wait, it came back up. It's still floating. So the regular soda sank and the diet soda floated. Why could that be? Why do you think? Let me look at the label on the back. What's the difference in the label? The diet soda has 0 sugar. On the regular soda has 43 grams of sugar. So maybe that's because the molecules inside the diet soda or inside the regular soda are more dense and the molecules in here are less dense. That's the only explanation we can think of, because 43 grams of something is a lot more than 0 of something. So even though they have the same weight, the same ounces, this one is a little bit more dense. So that's why it sank, and that's why the diet floated. Once again, we want to see what you test. So make sure that you try this at home, but with the permission of an adult. And we'd love to see your chart right here, tracking what you found that sank and what you found floated. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.